point, he did not articulate to me that he was aroused by or had fantasies by cutting something or feeling any degree of arousal by anything that was still living and might be injured.
Okay, continue on, please.
I asked him whether or not he had any sexual contact with his friend named Jay, and he indicated, he claimed that there were not, he denied that they had engaged in any sexual activity. He claimed that there were not changes in the nature of his sexual fantasies at this point in time. In discussing this area of his life, he spontaneously recalled that one girl in his Latin class had committed suicide and another girl had shot herself. He remembered thinking that he did not know why anyone would want to kill themselves at this age or during the teenage years.
What significance is that?
Well, that it was just so alien to him, and this is the way most youth feel, that they've got a lot to live for, okay. And he felt he had a lot to live for. During the summer of his 18th year, he recalled that his parents divorced. His father moved into a motel, and his mother took his younger brother and moved. Jeffrey was left alone in the house. He recalled that his father began dating another woman. Jeffrey recalled being depressed and tried to deal with his feelings by drinking alcoholic beverages and smoking pot. He noted that it was during his senior year that he began having fantasies about finding a hitchhiker, killing him, and having sex with him. However, he recalled that was not able to act on those fantasies because he did not have a car, and there had been people at home until that point in time. After his high school graduation in the summer of 78 or 79, Jeffrey was unclear of the year, he reported that his mother decided to move to Wisconsin and take his brother. Jeffrey said that she made him promise not to tell his father where she was moving to.
Let me ask you whether or not his mother invited him to go along also, or not?
It's my understanding, and this was, I don't think I asked Jeffrey this in the interview. I think I read it in one of the police reports that his mother had asked Jeffrey to go along, but Jeffrey elected not to go.
Did Jeffrey indicate to you that he felt abandoned when his mother left or not?
He did not say that he felt abandoned, just that he didn't use that word. He used the word that he felt depressed.
He felt what?
Depressed.
Okay. Continue on, please.
In the summer of 1978, he then had a car and was living alone at the house. He had been drinking and was returning home when he saw a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker was not wearing a shirt, and he debated about whether or not to pick him up. He finally decided to pick this man up. The man's name was, and it's all right to mention the names of the victims. His name was Stephen Hicks, who was approximately 19 years of age. Stephen Hicks got into the car and agreed to go back to the house, to Jeffrey's house. Jeffrey reported that they talked and smoked some marijuana. He reported that it was clear to him that Stephen Hicks was not gay. However, he wanted to keep him there. While Stephen was sitting on the bed, Jeffrey hit him in the head with a barbell and then strangled him with that barbell. Jeffrey recalled having smoked 1 or 2 joints and had consumed a 12-pack of beer that day. He reported that he decided to hit Stephen when he learned that he was not gay because he wanted to keep him with him.
At this point in time, as a clinician getting his history, has he now fulfilled his fantasy?
Yes, he has.
This is the first time?
First time.
Okay, go ahead.
In thinking back, Jeffrey stated that if he had only taken a different route, that episode would not have happened. He stated that he felt it was almost like it was set up to occur. After he knocked, and if I might just make a comment there, Mr. Sure. Boyle, what is of interest to me, and I just picked it up, is that if you recall when I was relating the story about his friend in school who then told the principal, he used about the choking, he used the same phrase that he felt that he would set up, and it's the same here. After he knocked Stephen Hicks out, he took his clothes off and masturbated. When it became dark, he took Stephen's body to the crawl space, laid him down, and left him there. He reported he could not sleep and felt very nervous about what he had done and about being apprehended. He reported that he masturbated while standing over the body and ejaculated on the body.
At this time, being a clinician, assuming all these facts were brought to your attention, other than the fact that he had just committed a homicide, it's clear that his was a very deeply troubled person.
Absolutely.
Continue on, please.
May I make a comment?
Yes.
Jeffrey, during my interview with him, it was my perception that he had difficulty discussing in detail the specific sexual acts that he engaged in with his victims after death. When I arrived here on Sunday, I met with Jeffrey again, and I have, during that interview, I asked him again about certain specific sexual acts, and I have obtained more information. So if you would like, I could supplement that with my statements regarding the specific sexual acts.
At the end, please.
Okay.
Continue on.
He reported that he knew that Stephen was not gay because he had talked about his girlfriend. Jeffrey reported that he, quote, had a driving compulsion to do this, end quote. That is, to knock Stephen Hicks out and to keep him. Jeffrey reported that he tried to sleep, but wasn't able to do it. The next morning, he went to the store and purchased a large hunting knife, and he went to the crawl space and dismembered the body. He cut off the arms and legs. He recalled opening up the belly.
At this juncture, this is the first time he opens up the belly of anything other than the dead animals, right?
That's correct.
You don't ever see him using a knife on any other, himself or any of his friends. This is the first time.
He did not report to me that he had ever used a knife on anyone else or on himself.
Or for any reason.
No.
Did he have to go purchase the large hunting knife?
I don't recall asking him whether he had purchased it or whether the knife was there.
Well, your report says the next morning he went to the store and purchased
then there it is.
Okay, continue on, please.
At 3 a.m., as he drove to the dump, he was pulled over by police for driving left of the center line. He indicated that he passed the sobriety test. For driving left of center line. He indicated that he passed the sobriety test. The policeman shined the flashlight in the back seat of the car and noticed the trash bags. Jeffrey told him that he was taking the trash to the landfill. He reported that there was a slight odor because he had had the body for 1 or 2 days. The policeman let him go. Jeffrey turned around and went home and put the bags in the crawl space. He brought the head upstairs, laid it on the floor, and masturbated in front of it. The next morning, he put the bags behind the house in the woods. He burned the clothes of the victim and then threw the knife and Stephen's necklace into the river. I asked Jeffrey how he felt about this, about those actions, and he reported that he was high-strung, nervous, apprehensive, and thought a lot about what he had done. He reported that at this point, his drinking increased and he would cry when he was drunk. He subsequently went to Ohio State University for 3 months. He stated that he, quote, flunked out, end quote. He reported that during this time, he drank all of the time. By this time, his father had moved back into the house with his new wife, Sherry. His father and Sherry thought it would be a good idea for Jeffrey to join the Army. I asked him if he knew, at this point, I asked him if he knew that it was wrong to take another person's life, and he reported that he knew that it was wrong. At age 18, he entered the Army and signed up for a 3-year enlistment. He subsequently served 2.5 years of that enlistment. He reported that he did his basic training in Alabama. They were not allowed to drink during the 4 weeks of their basic training, but then they were allowed to drink. He reported that one night he came back drunk and became ill. 2 other Army men started beating him up for getting the troop in trouble by getting drunk. Jeffrey reported that his eardrum was broken as a result of this beating. He did not tell his commanding officers about the beating. However, he felt that he wanted to get back at these men. He did not, and he repressed his anger. He continued to drink throughout his military enlistment. He spent 2 years in Germany and described his stay there as, quote, a drunken paradise, end quote. He reported that he drank constantly and mostly beer. He stated he felt frustrated sexually and that he was attracted to some of the men but felt he could not act on that attraction. He went to Frankfurt and bought pornographic material in the bookstores there. Most of the magazines profile bodies of males 16 years of age and older. He took care of his sexual drive via these magazines. He reported that his fantasies were still there, but his life was so regimented and he drank so much that he satisfied himself through pornography and masturbation. He reported that he was kept quite busy in the military. After work, he would go to bars and to the liquor stores and buy liquor at half price. He had made some friends and he would go to restaurants with them and talk. He reported not having engaged in any consensual sex while in the military. He reported that he was able to control his impulses through alcohol, the regimentation of the military, pornography, and masturbation. At age 21, he left the military. He wanted to go someplace warm and sunny, and consequently, he went to Miami, Florida, where he stayed from March 81 to September 81. He reported that he ran out of money and would sleep on the beach. He worked at a sub shop, one of those submarine sandwich shops, 7 days a week. He reported that he worked so much and drank so much that he did not have time for anything else. He befriended a woman from England who worked at the same sub shop, and they would go to dinner together. He reported that this was a good friendship. In September of 1981, he moved back with his father and remained there for 2 or 3 months. He reported that he dug up the remains of Stephen Hicks, smashed them, and scattered them in the woods. He reported that he was still drinking at this time and that his parents became, quote, fed up, end quote, with his drinking. They thought it would be good for him to go to his grandmother's house, who lived in West Allis, Wisconsin, and help her with her chores. He did not want to go, but they insisted. At this point, he was drinking about a 6-pack a day. He reported that things worked out all right by going to live with his grandmother.
I'd like to stop at this time and ask you 2 questions. First of all, you read the police report, the confession.
Yes.
Jeffrey Dahmer had indicated to the police that he disposed of Mr. Hicks's bodies totally, completely, within a short period of time after the murders. He's telling you that it was 2.5 years later. What do you know from what you have learned to be the fact of that?
Well, I think, and again, even in my interviewing Jeffrey with this many victims, sometimes there would be a degree of confusion as to exactly how many days he kept the body, and sometimes even in terms of which victim he victimized at what point in time. So that might be an explanation.
But I wish to ask you this, is Jeffrey Dahmer has all of these fantasies and does all the things you've got us up to this point, and now he kills a human being, and he keeps the head, and he does the terrible things he does with that body. What effect does this have on him as he's going along, based upon the psychological profile that you have, as he continues on in his life with the knowledge that he has done something as terrible and as terribly grotesque as this?
Well, what Jeffrey told me was that he tried not to think about it. I mean, he tried to put, this horrible act behind him, and it was not something he wanted to be reminded of.
As a clinical psychologist, based upon your knowledge and experience, and assume all the mechanics that you've told us about in Jeffrey Dahmer's life are in order as he approaches the killing of Mr. Hicks, Is he, after killing Mr. Hicks, is he going to be successful in putting that out of his mind?
Well, the fact is he was not successful in putting it out of his mind, and he was not successful after a period of time in being able to not act on his sexual interest.
My question is, if a normal person, I'm saying a psychologically average normal person, were to have, for whatever reason, done exactly what Mr. Dahmer did, that is, murder Mr. Hicks, without any of the other problems that led up to that, just on an impulse, kill somebody like that, what kind of effect would you as a clinical psychologist expect to have that on the mind of a person with a conscience as they try and go along in their normal life's activity, having done something as horrendous?
If they had...
Speculation on a number of grounds.
Well, I will allow it if the witness indicates that she's able to testify to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty.
With those parameters, if you're not able to, tell us, and if you are, tell us.
You know, it's, I guess, first of all, I would like to think that normal people don't kill other people. So it's difficult for me, you know, to say if a normal person, I would want to ask you, did this normal person kill somebody intentionally?
Okay.
Did they kill them in self-defense? I would need a lot more information, and actually would like to interview that normal person.
Okay, let's continue on then with where we are.
Thank you.
What is it after he moves to West Dallas, you ask him about his stepmother?
I asked him how he felt about his stepmother, and he reported that she was outspoken and gregarious. He indicated that he has a good relationship with her at the present time, that is the time I was doing this interview. And he indicated that his stepmother and his father had visited him several times since he had been imprisoned. At this point in the interview, again, I was interested in finding out more about Jeff's biological mom. And so I asked him again about his mother, and all that he stated was that she worked with AIDS patients. At this point, after he said that, he discussed his suicidal ideation, and again, that's not a phrase that Jeffrey used, but...
What is a suicidal ideation?
When people are thinking about taking their own lives or having their life taken.
He brought that up?
Excuse me?
He brought that up?
Yes.
Tell us about that.
What he said to me was, quote, "I would like if a doctor gave an order for anesthetics," end quote.
What did that mean to you?
That he didn't want to live.
Okay, continue on.
He stated that he has felt this way since his arrest. He stated that it feels like there has been a nuclear explosion in his personal life, and all of this seems unreal to him. He stated that he has not made a suicide attempt, although he would know how to, and reported that when he is allowed to shave, he could simply cut his jugular. Jeffrey reported that he would like this trial to be over with as quickly as possible. He has not wanted to read any information regarding the publicity surrounding the case. He reported that he had not seen radio, TV, or newspapers since his arrest. I then got him back on track, in a sense, in terms of my history taking. He reported that age 22, he had been out of work for 1 year and was receiving unemployment compensation. He stated that he was drinking a lot and looking for work. He would do work around the house for his grandmother and indicated that he had a nice relationship with her. His father would come to visit them on holidays. He continued to have fantasies regarding capturing people at that time, but he controlled them through pornography.
His fantasies.
His fantasies. I asked him about the nature of the pornographic material he had, and he stated that they were about gay issues. Some just showed male bodies and others acts. Some had bondage, but he didn't purchase these.
Can he tell you why not?
I want to be precise about this,
Sure.
Okay? I think what he said was that it didn't interest him.
Okay.
He stated that at this point, the incident with Stephen Hicks had begun to fade. I asked him if he had ever had any dreams or nightmares about Stephen. He reported that he had not.
What's the significance of that?
Well, you'd asked me before about if a person had taken the life of another person, how might it affect them? And for some people, when tragic things occur or they make tragic things occur, they might, be wrestling with it in their sleep. And he was not. He did not have any dreams or night terrors about this.
What is the significance of Jeffrey Dahmer at this age, having done the thing that he did? What is the significance of him not dreaming about Mr. Hicks?
Well, Jeffrey had said that what I think it is, I don't know for sure what the significance is, okay. Mr. Boyle, okay?
I think you have to tell us to a reasonable degree of psychological certainty, so if you can't, just continue on.
Yeah, I guess what I would be most comfortable saying is that for a lot of people, when there are conflicts, sometimes it shows up in their dreams. This was not showing up in his dreams.
Continue on, please.
He stated that he had no friends, was isolated, depressed, and lonely. He also reported in terms of meeting someone that he was reluctant to go to video booths because he was naive. At age 23, he obtained a job at the Plasma Center as a phlebotomist. He held this job for a period of 1 year. He reported that this was a low-paying job. He did not like the work, and he was ultimately fired for poor performance. He stated that he lost touch with his mother for about 6 years. This was between the ages of 21 to 27. And during this period, he did not have very much in the way of contact with his brother. He continued to frequent sexually explicit bookstores, and his fantasies remained the same. Over the period of ages 23 to 25, and after he lost his job, he decided to change his life around. He went to church with his grandmother, and he stated that he was able to repress his fantasies and desires. He tried to stop masturbating and actually decreased his masturbatory activity to 1 time per week. He reported that he had felt guilty and consequently stopped fantasizing. He told me that he knew that his fantasies were still lurking, but he tried to lead what he described as a, quote, straight and narrow life, end quote. At age 25, he was reading a book in a library when a man came by and dropped a note in his lap. The note said, quote, "Meet me in the bathroom, I'll give you a blowjob," end quote. Jeffrey stated this was the first time he had been propositioned and thought it was a strange thing to happen, and he also thought that this was bizarre. He stated that at this point his desires came back and the urges started to grow stronger and stronger. 2 months after this, he reports that his control broke down. He began drinking, frequenting the bookstores, and feeling guilty. His church attendance dropped off, and he gave up trying to resist the urges. He stated that he started going to video rooms, meeting people, and having sex. He discovered gay bars and went to them. He reported that at this point, magazines were not enough. The compulsion was very prevailing, and he failed in his attempt to resist it. He stated that he began going to bars approximately 3 times a week, but mostly on the weekends. During this time, he was employed, it's okay to say the type of industry, Mr. Yes. Boyle? He was employed at a chocolate factory where he mixed chocolate. He subsequently worked at the chocolate factory for a period of 7 years. While working at the chocolate factory, he made some friends, but did not socialize with them after work. In essence, his life consisted of working and on weekends going to bookstores, gay bars, and bath clubs. He reported that at the baths, the notion was, quote, sex, anything goes, end quote. He reported that he used condoms some of the time. He stated that he liked being the active person in sex, that he only allowed anal penetration once or twice because it hurt him. He reported...
You're not using the name of the drug.
I will not.
Okay, thanks.
All right. He reported that he started using, and I'll just say a drug that had sedating effect.
Sleeping pills, I think.
Right. He started using sleeping pills during this period because some guys wanted to perform anal sex and he did not want to. This was a way of keeping them. Specifically, he did not want to be the recipient of anal sex, and consequently, if he were to drug the person, they would then fall asleep and he would not have to participate in anal sex where he was the receptive partner. That is where the person would put their penis in him. He reported that he would go to the baths on weekends and have approximately 3 or 4 partners, but would never leave with anyone. He stated it was not possible to have a relationship because he was still living at his grandmother's house. He indicated that he tried to control the compulsion and went to a store at closing time. He was trying to control his compulsion. So he went to a store when it was about to close. He hid out in the store, and then he stole a mannequin from the store and brought it to his house. He kept this mannequin for 2 weeks. He would stand over the mannequin and masturbate. His grandmother saw the mannequin and asked him where he got it. He then took the mannequin out and disposed of it. In another attempt to control his sexual fantasies and behaviors, he began to screen the obituaries and went to a funeral home to find a male of the physique and age that he was attracted to. He found one, and the deceased was 18 years of age. He then went to the graveyard and was going to dig up the body, but the ground was too hard. He reported that while he was in the graveyard, a dog barked and an owl hooted, and he found this to be rather eerie, and he left. He reported that he made attempts to resist his impulses, but they were useless. The obsessions and compulsions were his main focus, and the only time that brought him pleasure.
The only things.
The only things, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
He reported that he thought about them all the time. I asked him at this point about other paraphiliac behaviors, paraphiliac meaning sexually deviant. He told me that he had exposed himself approximately 5 or 6 times before being arrested, and that the targets were always teenage boys. He stated that he would have preferred to have exposed himself to non-minors, but it was safer exposing to younger boys. He exposed himself and masturbated in the park and was arrested for lewdness to a 13 and 14-year-old boys. He reported that he never propositioned them. That is, I asked him if he had. He was evaluated and placed on probation and saw a doctor, should I just say a therapist? Or
no, her name is...
Dr. Rosen for a period of 1 year for therapy. He stated that he was resentful at having to see Dr. Rosen, and he felt that he had things under control. Consequently, he felt he could, quote, give her a snow job and get it over with, end quote. He reported that he was defiant up to the point of sometimes turning his back on Dr. Rosen and facing the wall. He did not feel that he could get anything positive out of the therapy. Now, Mr. Boyle, there are 2 pieces of information that may be of relevance but are not in my notes.
Would you just read them and counsel will understand?
Okay. To tell you what those 2 pieces
yes,
are?
Please.
Okay. One is, what's not in my notes is there's another form of paraphilia called frottage. That means to rub, and people who rub their bodies against other people who have not given them permission to do that. And a number of years ago, at some kind of event, I don't recall if it was a concert or not, he rubbed his body up against a couple of guys who were at that concert. And that was the only time, at least, that he reported that he did that.
But that's to a live person.
A live person,
conscious
yes.
person.
A conscious person.
Okay.
The other, I subsequently asked Jeffrey, what was the nature of the therapy that he received at this point? That is, when he went into therapy, what was the focus? He had been arrested for public lewdness to minors. So I was wondering if that was the focus of therapy. That is, was the focus dealing with the behavior of exposing himself to young boys? He reported that was not the focus of the therapy. The focus of the therapy was on his drinking behavior when he entered the therapy.
So his therapy, from what he said, was focused on something other than the paralytic problem.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
At age 20, he denies engaging in other forms of paraphilic behavior, including voyeurism, transvestism, transsexualism, and telephone scatologia. Those are all other forms
Tell
of
us what they are. What's voyeurist?
peeping toms. People who transvestism is individuals who like to dress in the clothing of someone of the opposite sex. Transsexualism, that's actually an individual who believes that they are the person of another sex. So I said, do you feel that you are a woman trapped in a man's body? He said he was not. Telephone scatologia, that's obscene phone calls.
Okay.
At age 26, he reported that he was heavily into the bath clubs. He bought a large TV and VCR and began buying pornographic videos. These consisted of striptease acts and what he called, quote, heavier sex, end quote. He started drinking on weekends and would consume 24 cans of beer over a Friday and Saturday.
Well, does that be 24 cans total or?
Total.
So
over
12
the
a day if he is split them, right?
I don't know that it came out exactly to be 12 a day, but he said over that weekend,
Okay,
24 cans.
Go ahead.
He stated that he began working on Sunday evenings. After a year of being a member of a bath club, his membership was revoked because he used pills and liquor on the premises. While at the bathhouse, his interest was, quote, finding the best-looking guy, end quote, laying and touching him and listening to his heartbeat.
So did he explain why this listening to the heartbeat was an important factor or not?
No.
Did you ask him?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Sometimes he would fall asleep with the person. He reported that it cost $10 a night to stay in a room at the bath club and $1 for each additional hour. He reported that at the bath club, a person could get a double or single room with mirrors, tables, a lock on the door, and some rooms had videos. He reported that at this time, he was working the night shift at the chocolate factory, would go to the bars on weekends, usually around 2 a.m. He reported that once he got to the bathhouse, he would find a person and then lay next to the person and masturbate and engage in what he called, quote, light sex, end quote. He reported that most of the men he met there did not want just the light sex, but wanted what he called, quote, heavy sex, end quote. He stated that once the person was asleep, he did not feel quite so rushed or pressured with the person. He reported that he would fix a drink in which he would put approximately 5 sleeping pills, and this would keep the person asleep for approximately 8 hours. He stated he would stay with the person, staying awake for about 3/4 of the time, and then he would sleep with the person. Usually, he would masturbate 3 times during that period. He reported that he never injured anyone and never recalled attempting to strangle any of these men that he stayed with at the bathhouse. He stated that once he was in the room, he would have some conversation with the person, mix them a drink, and kiss them. The person would then get groggy, and the person would then fall asleep. He indicated that he would only experience an erection about 10% of the time when the person was in an awakened state. He reported that once the person fell asleep, he had complete control and could do what he wanted at his leisure. He did not have to entertain the person, and he felt that he could leave the room if he wanted to. He indicated that he had drugged 10 or 15 people before the management learned what he was doing. Subsequently, his membership was revoked. He then started using a local hotel room, and he stated that at this point, the bathhouse had been a much more controlled environment.
Now, he's telling you that when they're in an awakened state, he can only do something 10% of the time.
He could only get an erection 10% of the time.
Did you ask him about the other times when they were asleep?
Yeah, when they were asleep, he was able to get erections, and I think it's somewhere here in my notes, it was either 90 or 100% of the time.
And of course, he told you that during the time they were asleep, he was masturbating 3 times.
Yes, he was.
Okay, continue on, please.
Between the ages of 26 and 27, he started taking men to hotel rooms. And again, there's a piece of information missing here, Mr. Boyle. Actually, before Stephen Toomey, he had taken approximately 9 men to hotel rooms.
All of those left None of those were
He
killed.
didn't murder any of them.
Did he harm any of them?
No, he didn't self-report murdering or harming any of them.
Did he give them drinks with pills in them?
Yes.
Or not? He did?
Yes.
Okay, continue on.
He reported that these were regular hotels. He met Stephen Toomey, his second victim, at closing time at a gay bar. He went to the hotel room with Stephen and engaged in consensual sex. He reported that he made a drink that was 150 proof rum with Coke. Stephen then fell asleep after half an hour. He reports blacking out and waking up in the morning. Stephen was in bed on his back. Jeffrey recalls being on top of him. He reported that Stephen's head was over the side of the bed and there was a bruise on his chest. He stated that he, Jeffrey, had a bruise on his arm. Jeffrey was shocked when he saw that Stephen was dead. He stated that he had no intention of murdering him, and he stated that the bottle of rum was missing from the room. Jeffrey stated that he did not engage in sex with Stephen after he was dead, and then I go on to name the hotel.
Well, that's right. That's known as the Ambassador Hotel. But, but the fact of the matter is he did not engage in sex with him while he was in the hotel. After death.
Actually, after death, he did engage in sex with this person. He engaged in sexual acts after death with every single one of his victims. I don't recall, however, if it was there at that hotel.
Okay.
He stated that seeing Stephen dead brought back memories of 1978 and his first victim, Stephen Hicks. He stated that he had paced the floor, felt horrified, shocked, and frightened, and could not believe this had happened. He then put the body in a closet and went to a mall. He bought a suitcase and subsequently put the victim inside of the suitcase. He then rented the room for another night. At 1 a.m., he checked out and took a taxi to his grandmother's house. He kept the body in the fruit cellar for approximately 9 days. One day, while his grandmother was at church, he laid the body out and, according to Mr. Dahmer, quote, slit open the belly and masturbated. This was exactly the same behavior that Mr. Dahmer had engaged in with his first victim. I asked him if this had brought back memories, and he stated that when he had cut open his first victim, he was surprised at the color of the different organs. He then purchased triple-bag trash cans, and again, I apologize to the family members and to the jury, cut off the flesh of his victim into what he described as fist-sized pieces and put 25 pounds into each bag. He reported that he saved the skull and put the torso in an old sheet and then smashed it with a sledgehammer. Mr. Dahmer mentioned that there were this continues. I'm sorry.
That interview then ended for that day.
Yes, it did.
And you started up the next day.
When I saw Jeffrey the next day, he said that there were 2 Bibles that he had in his room, that is at the prison, a study Bible and the New King James Bible. And there was a passage in one of the books that he wanted me to see. Consequently, he asked if the guard would be able to bring the Bible down. Later on that day, the guard did bring the Bible down, and he showed me the passage of the book, and I will comment on that later. In regard to his second victim, Mr. Toomey, Jeffrey put the bags in a trash disposal. He reported that he kept the skull and called a taxidermist. He then boiled and bleached the skull and kept it for 1 week. He would view the skull and masturbate in front of it. He reported that with this victim, he recalled engaging in light sex initially, and then after he realized that he was dead, he masturbated on 2 occasions prior to disposing of the body. He stated that he felt depressed and anxious, and this incident triggered his complete moral decline. I asked him at this point whether or not he thought about his victims, and he reported that when images started to come back, he felt uncomfortable, and he tried to dissociate because of these uncomfortable feelings. He tried not to think about them. At age 28, he met his third victim, James Doxtator, who he thought was approximately 16 years old and who he thought was an American Indian. He was working at the chocolate factory at that time and was living at his grandmother's.
You're talking about Dahmer was working at the factory.
Right. I'm sorry. Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay. He reported that he was paying his grandmother $400 a month for rent and was helping her with the chores, such as weeding the garden. According to Jeffrey, she was glad when he brought her chocolate from the chocolate factory. According to Jeffrey, he had been at a bar on a Saturday night. He was standing in front of a bus stop and saw an attractive male. He assumed that this male had been drinking and asked him if he wanted to spend the night for $50. The victim agreed and took a bus to his home. That's the grandmother's home. They sat in the living room while his grandmother was asleep. They laid together, kissed, and engaged in oral sex. The male said that he had to be back by morning, and Jeffrey did not want him to leave, so he fixed him a drink. When the victim fell asleep, he strangled him. After he was dead, Jeffrey laid with him for a while and then had anal sex. He placed the body in the fruit cellar and put a blanket over him. The next morning, he ate breakfast with his grandmother, and she went off to church. He kept the third victim's body for 1 week. During this period of time, he would lay with him and masturbate. At the end of the week, he laid the body out and, according to Jeffrey, quote, defleshed it, end quote. He kept the skull and viewed it. He stated that he may have masturbated in front of the skull, but does not remember. He reported that the bleach solution he had used was too strong and the skull started crumbling. According to Jeffrey, his compulsion was in full swing at this time. However, he was attracted to this third victim and wanted to keep him. His fourth victim, a Hispanic male, approximately age 21, named Richard Guerrero. Jeffrey was at the Phoenix bar at closing time. He propositioned this victim, offering him $50. They went to Jeffrey's bedroom, laid there, and drank. They had light sex, and Jeffrey then fixed him a drink and subsequently strangled him. Light sex, according to Jeffrey, consisted of caressing, kissing, and mutual masturbation. He reported that he did not get an erection.
I'm sorry, I think you said did not. The report says he did.
He did get an erection. According to Jeffrey, the actual act of strangling is not arousing to him. He then took the body to the basement, defleshed it, put it in a trash bag, and saved the skull. He kept the skull for several months and brought it to his 24th Street apartment when he moved there. He reported that the police never found the skull. He left his grandmother's home because he wanted to live on his own and because once his grandmother had commented on his bringing a young man to her home. This made him feel uncomfortable, and he made up a story about why the young man was there. 1 month after he moved, he ran into a young Asian male and invited him to his home to take pictures. Jeffrey reported that he took pictures of the young male in his underwear and then offered him a drink. The young male then left, went home, and told his parents. According to Jeffrey, he did not plan on killing this person. He just wanted to take pictures and engage in light sex. Jeffrey was subsequently arrested, placed on 1-year work release, and given 5 years probation. He reported that this arrest, quote, scared the hell out of me, end quote. According to Jeffrey, the reason he did not plan to kill him was that he had to go to work that night, and that helped him control his compulsion. His fifth victim was Anthony Sears, approximately 25 years of age, who Jeffrey defined as half black and half white. At the time that he met this victim, he was still going to bars, was approached by Anthony Sears. Jeffrey invited him back to his home and did not offer him money. They were given a ride to Jeffrey's grandmother's house where he was staying by a friend of the victim. Jeffrey reported that they engaged in light sex. He had given this victim a drink mixed with a sleeping pill. The victim fell asleep and Jeffrey strangled him. At this point in the interview, I asked Jeffrey whether or not his arrest had not served as a deterrent to further engaging in necrophilic behavior. Jeffrey reported that the compulsion had been so strong that he had killed the victim right after the arrest and prior to being incarcerated. He masturbated on this victim and also had anal sex with him. Jeffrey laid for 1.5 to 2 hours with the victim. He severed the head and disposed of the body and saved the genitals. He wanted to preserve the head and put it in a 10-gallon pail with a lid. He soaked the head and genitals in acetone, which served to, quote, mummify them, end quote. He reported that they dried for 2 weeks. Subsequently, he would hold the head in his hands and masturbate. According to Jeffrey, the head represented the essence of the person. I asked him if he spoke with the head, and he reported that he may have, but he didn't recall what he had said. He did not take any pictures of the head. At this point, Jeffrey purchased a black table for a temple that he was going to build. It was to be an area of worship to give him more control financially, socially, and in every area of his life. It was to be a center for, quote, gathering energy, end quote. He reported that he had been attending occult bookshops and had purchased a book, the Satanic Bible. Jeffrey had purchased this table prior to going to prison. He had spray painted his 5th victim's skull with a granite compound and put the head and genitals in a cosmetic case and stored it at the chocolate factory while he was incarcerated. At this point, I asked him about the ethnicity of his victims. He stated that 10 of his victims were Black and 7 were not. He stated that his victims were Hispanic, Black, and Asian.
And white.
He also reported that 5 were not homosexual. Jeffrey targeted people whose physique and looks were particularly attractive to him. So in some cases that would be an ethnic minority, and in some cases it might be a person who was heterosexual. Jeffrey was released from prison after 9 months. He then took the skull from the cosmetic case and took the flesh off of it, but saved the skull. He liked and saved the genitals and the scalp because he stated that this victim had a nice head of hair. He stated at this time, quote, maybe I was born too late. Maybe I was an Aztec, end quote.
I want to ask you a few questions about this last paragraph. What's the Aztec aspect of this? Did you ask what he meant by that?
I did ask. I asked Jeffrey what was the meaning of that to him. And he said that he had an understanding that Aztecs would preserve parts or all of the dead.
Now, going back to what he said earlier to you about this black table for a temple, what was this area of worship to give him more control financially, socially, in every area of his life? How is that going to be accomplished by doing a temple of worship?
That was not clear to me, and I don't know whether it was not clear to Jeffrey or he had difficulty articulating it, but other than Jeffrey at that point said to me, let me make a drawing for you of what that would be, and then he produced a drawing which he gave me.
We'll get to that a little later.
Okay.
Did you understand what he meant, that it was to be a center for, quote, gathering energy?
Well, I have to tell you, Mr. Boyle, that sounded very psychotic-like to me. However, as you know, I did not make the diagnosis of psychosis. But people who have thought disorders will sometimes talk about this, a center of worship to get special powers, etc. So initially that was what I thought. So while the behavior appears to me psychotic-like, Jeffrey says he would be getting special energy, but he wasn't hearing any voices or people telling him to do this, in a sense.
So therefore, you did not find psychosis.
That's correct.
But you made these notes because they were like psychosis.
It appeared to me psychotic-like behavior. Okay.
Continue on, please.
I asked, and then I said, I asked Jeffrey whether or not he heard any voices talking to him. He stated that he had not. He spontaneously said, quote, "but the unspoken compulsion was painful," end quote. He also stated that after his release from prison, he purchased a griffin.
What's a griffin?
It's a little figure, and I think in some of the photos that the police have of his apartment, there are some pictures of them. I must acknowledge I don't have that great a knowledge of the occult, and I'm not certain what the functions of griffins are.
Go ahead.
At age 29, he met his sixth victim. Cash D. Raymond Smith is what I have in my notes. He had moved to 25th Street and was back working at the chocolate factory. He began going to the bars again. He ran into Cash D, who he thought was a black male prostitute, and offered him money to go home with him. While at his home, Cash D said he wanted more money. Jeffrey gave him a drink, laid with him, and then once he was asleep, strangled him. At this time, Jeffrey stated that he began to watch the movie Return of the Jedi, and he stated that he identified with the Emperor, who was the head of the Federation. He identified with this Emperor because he had power and control. He would watch this movie while the victim was in his house. He reported that he purchased yellow-tinted contacts to be like the character in Return of the Jedi, and he would wear the contacts to the bars. He indicated that some of the people at the bars told him that he had nice-looking eyes. He stated that he wanted to be the Emperor. He also wore these contacts sometimes during the week, but not to work. He took this victim and would lay him on the black table in various poses. He took pictures of the victim, masturbated in front of him. He kept the victim for 2 days, and he placed him in these different poses in order to accentuate his physique. According to Jeffrey, he did not engage in anal sex with this victim, but he did masturbate on his body. He kept the skull and spray painted it. He took the body into the bathroom, dismembered it, and placed the remains in the garbage. He kept the skeleton because he was not able to smash it. He purchased an 80-gallon kettle and boxes of Silex. He boiled parts of the body for 1 hour to clean the flesh off. He rinsed off the bleach and dried the body out. He then had a complete skeleton. He reported that his interest in the occult had intensified at this point and that full range was given to his fantasies. He stated that Cash D had been a very good-looking male. He continued to drink and was drinking a 12-pack each day of the weekend. In talking with him about the motivation for his behavior, he reported that he just wanted to keep the person with him and did not want them to leave. He recalled that prior to killing Cash D, he had brought another man back to the apartment and made him a drink, as he usually did in a coffee cup. The man drank the wrong cup, and consequently, Jeffrey drank the drink with the sleeping pills. He fell asleep, and the man robbed him of $300. Jeffrey did not report this incident to the police. He reported he would have strangled this victim, but the man had taken the cup without the sleeping pills. After Cash D, Jeffrey met...
This next one is a juvenile, so you can use initials.
I will.
Thanks.
After Cash D, Jeffrey met a young man with the initials LP, who was waiting tables. He was Hispanic, and Jeffrey believed him to be around 16 years old. He propositioned him, and the man agreed to go to his apartment. They kissed, masturbated, and watched videos. Jeffrey did not have any pills available to him that weekend. He went to an Army surplus store and bought a mallet. He took pictures and had him lay on his stomach. He struck him on the back of the neck with the mallet. The guy got up and attempted to leave the apartment and said he would call the police. This male left and then came back in and asked Jeffrey for money for a cab. Jeffrey tried to strangle him at this point, but then calmed down, and they both went into the bedroom. Jeffrey called him a cab and he went home. Jeffrey said that this young male did call the police, but the police never followed up on the call.
What is your belief if you know, I believe, what is it? Why didn't he kill him?
Why didn't he kill him?
Yes.
I have a hypothesis, Mr. Boyle, but I don't know if this is accurate or not. This was a young male, and it's quite possible that Jeffrey might have had some notion in his mind that if he killed a very young person, there might have been more done in the way, I mean, parents would know a young person was missing. Maybe.
I'm going to object that this is based on speculation by which that ask that the answer be stricken.
Motion granted.
Continue on, Doctor.
Edward Smith, a black male, age 25, was his 7th victim. He met this victim at a bar. He reported they had light sex. He drugged the man, strangled him, and took pictures. He defleshed him, boiled his skeletons, saved the skull, and dried it out in a closet. He disposed of the internal organs, but saved the skull and bones. He did have sex after he strangled the person. This consisted of touching, laying with him, masturbating 3 or 4 times over a course of 2 days. Jeffrey stated that he went to Sears and bought a 5-square-foot floor freezer with locking top to store the defleshed bones. He also purchased 2 30-gallon plastic trash bags to put the defleshed remains in. He poured muriatic acid to acidify the flesh and then flushed the remains down the toilet. He then placed the 2 skeletons in these gallons. 2 months later, he met his 8th victim, Ernest Miller, a black male in his mid-20s. Jeffrey stated that he met this man at the 27th Street bookstore. He propositioned and then went with him to his apartment. He had only a few pills available. While the victim was asleep, he thought, quote, "How should I keep him?" End quote. He did not want to put this person through any pain, and consequently, he stabbed him in the jugular. He reported that the victim died quickly. He reported that Jeffrey had to consume alcoholic beverages before he was able to stab the person. He then placed the body on a table and took many pictures. He kept the body for several days, masturbated on it, kissed it, and laid with it. He then took the body into the bathroom and defleshed it. He left the body there for a period of time. Someone in the apartment complex complained about an odor. Police were called and knocked on a nearby apartment door. They never entered Jeffrey's apartment. He finished defleshing the body, saved the head, and defleshed the skeleton, which he kept for 1 week. He then took the legs, heart, and kidneys and sliced them and stored them in freezer bags. After 1 week, he took the head out and masturbated in front of it. I asked Jeffrey at this point where he was obtaining the sleeping pills. He reported that he obtained it from a physician. He stated that the doctor was worried about him becoming addicted to it. He told the doctor that he worked the 3rd shift and had trouble getting to sleep during the day, and consequently he needed the medication. He saw the doctor once every 2 months and reported that the pills cost him $30 monthly. I asked him if he ever took the medication himself, and he reported, quote, "once in a while," end quote. Jeffrey made it clear to me that he drugged his victims because he did not want to hurt them or for them to feel any pain. Jeffrey did take pictures of this body. According to him, the body had tipped over and some skin scraped off of the face. He reported that he was surprised that the color under the skin was different than the color of the skin. He boiled the skull and skeleton and saved it. He wanted to save it permanently and was going to use this one skeleton on his temple. He painted the skull with granite spray paint. He tried tasting the flesh and the heart. He bought a tenderizer, tenderized the heart, and ate it and the muscle meat. He reported that it had a beef-like flavor. It gave him a sexual thrill while eating it. He felt that the man was a part of him and he had internalized him. He reported having an erection while eating it. He did not ejaculate, but did use the pictures to masturbate to ejaculation. At age 29, he met David Thomas, his 9th victim.
I think at this point I'd like to take a recess, a short one, about 5 minutes or so. Court's